You're listening to Sunny Side Up with tips on how to look on the bright side when life doesn't seem all it's cracked up to be. Hi, I'm Sarah Halstead from Synergy Home Care.
And I'm Chad Weston from Southern Care Hospice. How are you all doing today? Good to see you. Good to see you, Sarah. How are you?
Good to see you. I am fantastic. We are so happy to be here with you and to have you join us for our very first episode of this fantastic new series, Sunny Side Up.
Sunny Side Up it is. Can we say inaugural?
Okay,
I'd like to use the word inaugural if we could. Yes, our inaugural launch of Sunny Side Up, which is,
right.
Would you want to give a description of...
Yeah, exactly. Well, we got together, we were talking about the inspiration sort of hit us, and the idea for this is really that although there are rotten things that happen in life, although there will always be tragedies and difficulties and challenges, we have the opportunity as humans to be able to take that and turn it around a little bit, to look at the sunny side of things, to find positive things even in the difficult times in life. And when that happens, we can increase the quality of life for ourselves, for those around us, and wonderful and sometimes magical things happen in communities as a result. So this was just something near and dear to our hearts.
I could not agree more, Sarah. I know when we sat and talked about this, we talked about looking at all the headlines, what we're seeing out there, and all the negativity that's out there, and is not going to go away. It's not going to go away. So what choice do we have to look at it in a different way?
Right.
And that's, I guess, kind of how we came together with this and said, let's look at the sunny side of things. Let's take what we can from whatever negativity is out there and put it into something that we can work with and move on with.
Exactly. And so for this first episode, we decided to pick a pretty big topic. And this time of the year, and especially this year, we are looking at something that reminds us of a very difficult tragedy. We're coming up on the 15th anniversary of 9/11. And that certainly was a very sad day in our country and around the world for the things that happened and the impact that it had on so many, many lives.
Because it was such a powerful event. I don't know about you, Sarah, but when someone says to me, hey, it's the 15th anniversary, I still feel like it was just last month or last year. Every anniversary to me seems like it was just a year ago that it happened because of the powerful nature of that event. Just emotionally, psychologically on us as people and how we view the world.
You know, and it was probably one of the first times for my generation to really, truly feel that. I fit into that boat where I was probably a little too young to remember some of the earlier things in this century or in the previous century that happened that impacted people so much. But for me, this was defining, and I think for my kids too. And weren't you just sharing last week that this is the first year that the kids coming into high school are learning about 9/11 truly from a historical perspective because they weren't around.
They were not living and breathing when it happened. And now when we think about that, we think, oh, wow, everyone remembers that. Well, they weren't alive when that happened. It's the first one, first freshman history class that will learn it as, okay, so before you were born, this happened, right? But
for those of us who are around, we know the power of that day, and we wanted to actually turn that around. We're not talking about all the tragedy of that day, the fear, the awful things, but I know there was that Mr. Rogers quote, something about when he was young and he saw the things that were difficult and terrifying. He asked, or he said he was afraid, and his mother said, "Look for the helpers. There are always helpers." And I think this was so much the case when 9/11 happened, because we saw an awful lot of good things come about that day. People that offered to go and help, people that were there and in the moment. And it wasn't just that day. It continued and still continues today. So we wanted to highlight some of the good things that have happened since 9/11. And one of those things, I guess, is that, hey, we are cracking down on terrorism. This was something we didn't really think about before. And now there have been a lot of changes in our life. We're aware of that. We're aware of that possibility, and we're taking precautions.
Like you, Sarah, I do have some memories of terrorism. I do remember when the flight went down in 1989 over Lockerbie, Scotland, but I don't remember it so close, and I don't have that one-on-one personal history with it.
Right.
And I think when we think of that day, we think of tragedy. But now we look where we've come from and what we've learned. You said cracking down on terrorism. The idea of now we're finally looking at what's out there and the threats that are out there and doing something about those in ways that we never did before.
Right. So it is making the world a little safer, a little better place because we're more aware of that. And I think another thing that we became more aware of over time is that we're made aware that there are problems that are really with extremists in a lot of different groups, and unfortunately there are people who will sort of generalize and then have negative feelings towards an entire population because of the actions of a few extremists. But overall, I think that people have been able to understand that these were extremists that were taking that action, that this wasn't representative of an entire faith, religion, country, group of people, whatever. And I think when, the fact that this hit the World Trade Center and it affected people from every country, and we saw that outpouring of support from all over the world, we realized that, there were a lot of good people everywhere. It was a cross section of the population, and really those people that caused the problem were a small sliver of one group, not the entire group.
When I think of the World Trade Center, I think of the just the diversity that lived, breathed, resided, worked in those two towers, and I think of that everyone, the world lost individuals that day. It wasn't just a United States. Obviously, it happened on our ground, but certainly when I think about the diversity and the lessons from that, I know we talked last week. I didn't realize. The different types of religions that were out there prior to this event. Now that sounds kind of odd to say, but Sunni versus Shiite, I did not know the difference between those two, and I learned that through maybe a small educational through that tragedy, but it's something that awakened me to diversity, other cultures, and what people did outside of the borders we were so used to just standing behind.
Right. It made it a learning experience for all of us, which was fantastic. And you just said something else that I think was key. You talked about the United States, and if you think about those two words, United States, this was probably one of the first times when I remember that we were truly united. I mean, everybody came together. This was, I think some people felt, kind of a patriotism that they'd never felt before. Other took this as sort of an opportunity to sort of, assert their nationalistic pride. It was definitely something that touched us all. We saw flags everywhere. We saw people, really respecting each other and trying to help. And it wasn't just the United States, but certainly we were all united. I mean, we were united with people from other countries and other faiths, other groups. It was just amazing. Such
a sense of community. If I could use a word, community to me is what I felt like after that. We all got hurt. We all got knocked down.
Right.
And I think we all kind of came together. Something we talked about when it comes to a crisis or a tragedy, what really is one of the things that happens, one of the behaviors is that people kind of come together where neighbors may have not talked to each other. When there's a flood, we're all together working together.
Absolutely.
This kind of reignited that idea that, hey, we're all one. It's not these separate people. So when you say united, that's kind of what came up in my mind, that we are a community. We truly are.
You bet. And there were other things that we learned about that day, things that weren't necessarily about community or coming together, but we learned important things like how buildings fall. Regardless of what your personal idea is of what may have caused something or what might have been behind it, we learned about how that building fell. And I know your experience as a firefighter, you shared last week with me some of your thoughts about that.
Visiting 9/11, I had to go see it for myself. And looking up, you said we learned how buildings fall. Looking up and seeing the height, they've even one that's half the size of that, and thinking the tremendous loss of life that could have happened and what we learned about design and structure and safety and in taking care of ourselves. Absolutely. The bravery of the people running into those buildings and saying, what, my life doesn't matter. I want to make sure others survive, others live. It just sets you back. It's just so emotional.
Absolutely. And I think we saw people so eager to help out on many different levels. There was definitely an increase in civil service. We saw people immediately that were lining up to give blood. There were people that were showing up from all parts of the country that wanted to be able to help. And I just think that level of engagement was incredible. And nobody asked them to do that. People just, did that out of the goodness of their heart. They want to help. I think sometimes tragedy does bring the best out in people, so it gave us that opportunity to take a look at that. And as you said, people, they showed up, and this is when I think we realized, what a true hero could be.
Mm-hmm.
These were not people that, got up and put on their red cape that morning. These were ordinary people in extraordinary situations. And I think that is when you do find truly the most heroic people in history is during that kind of situation.
You said something to me the other day and I wanted to bring up. You said it redefined what a hero means.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when we think of heroes, I think of movie stars, musicians, sports heroes especially. We didn't think about the name of a firefighter who ran in and did the extraordinary that day and lost their life.
Right.
That wasn't someone we had up on our wall, a picture of. We didn't see that. So definitely redefined what we thought of a hero.
Right. And one of the other things that I remember from that day is shortly thereafter there were a lot of religious services. One of the things that truly was a blessing for many people is that they grew spiritually. Regardless of what their affiliation might be or their religious beliefs, people were coming together. There were many joint prayer sessions. There were, places of faith that opened up their doors to anybody who wanted to be there. And I remember when they were like 24 hours, they were there with people being able to pray and do their practice so that it really helped them feel connected to their spirituality. So in some ways, it really brought about some very positive things. And I know we could go on and on about this, but I think we'll take a break just to give our listeners a break, and we'll come back in just a minute with a little bit more on the sunny side up. Hi, I'm Sarah Halstead from Synergy Home Care.
And I'm Chad Weston from Southern Care Hospice.
And we are back talking a little bit more about our first show, Sunny Side Up, and the topic is 9/11 and looking at the positive things that came from that. And those of you who were with us just a few moments ago heard us talk about a number of good things that resulted from the event and the things that have happened since then, and we're going to tell you a little bit more of the good that has just grown and grown as a result. So we wanted to share with you some of the things that are in existence now that weren't around before this that happened because of that particular event. And there are so many new foundations and groups that have started to do good things because of the tragedy that day. One of the examples is something called the Carl V. Binney Memorial Fund. And this is a fund that was actually started and it honors firefighter Carl V. Binney, whose crew headed straight for the Trade Center towers as they were falling. And they actually collect a number of different donations and they help in times of need. So there certainly is no end to tragedy, but they have been able to raise more than $150,000 just in scholarships, but they've helped with things like having more than $100,000 for the victims of Hurricane Sandy. We know that there will be all kinds of tragedies because they experienced it. They know what it's like and they want to help somebody else. Now, Chad, you were sharing your story about how you actually how you got involved being a firefighter and things, and it was a result of this kind of tragedy too.
When we look at these tragedies, we talk about, again, we focus so much on that negative. When 9/11 happened, I think we were talking about exactly where we were, what we were doing at those moments, and I remember what came out of it for me was I wanted to be an EMT and a firefighter at one point in my life. I just never really took the time to do it. I just didn't get, it's a great way of saying it. I just didn't get around to it. And after that happened, I realized that I don't have that much time left. Anything can happen. So I went on and got an EMT certification, firefighter, and have been on a fire department 14 years now volunteering.
Fantastic.
So I look at those individuals that have gone through that stuff, have lost their lives, and then have inspired so many more to do so many amazing things, kind of like what we're talking about.
Right.
The good that came out of something so negative.
Right. Another example of a foundation that has cropped up since then is the Peter C. Alderman Foundation. And he was just 25 years old. He was attending a conference at the World Trade Center's Windows on the World when the towers actually fell. And in his memory, his parents created a foundation with his name, and it's actually dedicated to healing the emotional wounds left by terrorist attacks and the acts of mass violence. Today, that foundation runs 8 trauma clinics in Cambodia, Kenya, Liberia, and Uganda. So it's not just helping people here in the United States, but all over the world. One of his parents wrote, as an Iraqi psychiatrist told us last September 11th, because Peter lived, the world is a better place. And they said, we're leaving a profound and indelible mark that Peter existed on this earth. And I think this is such a true testimony to all of those wonderful people whose lives were cut short on that day and the good that can come about afterwards.
Absolutely right. I think about all the people that were in that close circle, their family, their friends, that lost someone they loved. And because of that trauma, went on to help others, to help heal themselves in a way, but help so many others around them. Would they have done that if that didn't happen? I think about that opportunity to say, I was a victim of this horrible trauma, but now I'm going to be a volunteer. I'm going to thrive through this and give as much as I can and help make the world better.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
Exactly. And I remember that day because I had 2 young children who were in elementary school and was kind of connecting with some parents online about what we could do to help. And we put together some tips for parents about how to talk with their children in light of such a difficult tragedy, how to be sensitive to the developmental stages and what they can understand, and how to keep their lives, secure so that they feel safe and yet can address some of the things that are going on around them. And I think that point of how it affects children is so interesting. There's actually another foundation. This is the Tide Wed Children's Foundation that has raised more than $1 million for victims of catastrophes, like 9/11 and like the Hurricane Sandy and other things. And they actually pioneered a school program that they called Zippy's Friends, and it's in an effort to help children cope with anxiety, depression, and loss, because the effects of this are they go on for so long, and we sometimes tend to think that it's only affecting adults who know what's happening, and that's so far from the truth.
It's totally shaping a generation of young kids growing up and becoming adults now that witnessed this tragedy.
Now here's another story. This one is about 9/11 Day, and it's about a nonprofit that's called My Good Deed that was started, and Jay Winnick's younger brother Glenn helped evacuate his law offices on 9/11, and then he ran back into the building to try to continue to rescue others, and he actually lost his life in the process. So the family co-founded a nonprofit called My Good Deed, and it's something that actually inspires people to annually celebrate and advocate for a day of service that they call 9/11 Day. I see you rubbing your shoulders.
I'm
like
getting chills
goosebumps.
as you read. I'm absolutely getting chills as you're reading this. Please continue this. I'm so sorry.
It's good. No, it's good. It's good. That's what happens when you really tap into the positive side of things. So My Good Deed has actually they actually helped to formulate the designation of September 11th as a National Day of Service, and this became a federal law in 2009. And it's something where a lot of people make pledges to perform good deeds on that particular day, and it's become a huge event. And I think this is one thing that we definitely can do in our own lives to show how we can take a bad situation and turn it into something positive.
Absolutely. I think that even on a global level, when something happens, it doesn't matter where it is, where we're at, we can start where we're at and do those amazing things right around us.
Right. And this is a story that kind of touched my heart. This is about a foundation that's called New York Says Thank You. New York Says Thank You Foundation. And this was inspired by the outpouring of support, that they received, that it was such a tragic day, but that all kinds of people from all over came to support them. And as a result, they started a nonprofit called New York Says Thank You. And every September, the victims of past disasters step up to help current victims rebuild their lives. So far, they've helped with wildfires out in the West. They've helped with tornadoes that cut through Oklahoma, hurricanes like Katrina and Sandy, all these things that have happened since then, to be able to help somebody else because they know firsthand what it was like and they appreciate so much. I think that element of gratitude and appreciation is going to be a common thread that we see throughout this Sunny Side Up program. But in this particular situation, it sparked something fantastic.
I think about all those individuals that go through those events, and then they reach out and somebody hands them their own hand, pulls them out, and then they want to turn back around and say, okay, who's behind me?
Yes.
Who's behind me that I can help up now? And when you're reading this, again, for those listeners out there, the goosebumps on my arm right now, I just raised up due to just the amazing giving and caring from those individuals that lost so much.
Yes, and I know that through this particular foundation, their service initiatives have touched all 50 states. It's something that continues to go. I love some of the things that they say about their core values and belief. Number one was love is stronger than hate. Love is stronger than hate. They said the positive lessons of citizenship from that day, and they didn't say 9/11, they said 9/12, the day after, how people responded. Wow. The lessons of citizenship from 9/12 are timeless, universal, and actionable. They thought any tragedy can be turned into hope through service, and that is something that we see through everything that they do, and that respect for diverse faiths, cultures, and backgrounds makes for stronger organizations and stronger communities. They feel that empowering survivors as volunteers actually drives to make that kind of pay it forward sort of idea quite a dynamic one, and that even a single child can change the world. So the kinds of things that they are doing are all because of those kinds of core values and beliefs.
I like how you used 9/12. It's not what we do the day that we get knocked down. It's what we do the following day.
That's right.
When we get back up and we are stronger than we were, and we're going to get stronger.
Or the following year,
or the following year,
15 years later.
Here we are, 15 years later.
Absolutely. You know, I feel very passionate about this, just even talking about it. And here in the studio, we talked about how as these news stories come up, as we are reminded of that day, we're going to be having conversations over and over. We're going to be hearing this, and we have that ability to shape history in a way, to be able to tell the story with a positive twist. As we're talking to our kids, our grandchildren, neighbors, whoever it may be, we're likely to share that story of what we remember because it was traumatic, even for each one of our listeners who was alive that day. But then to put that positive spin on it, I think gives us an incredible opportunity, and also that opportunity to volunteer. We would actually challenge our listening audience to go ahead and do this, to decide on something that you can do that will actually bring about some good in the world as a result, and to make this a positive thing. So sometime during the month of September, we challenge you to do a good deed, to volunteer and help another organization.
And we're not even putting a time limit on this. We're not putting an hour long, 2 hours, 4 hours,
right?
Whatever you want, whatever deed you might want to do, whatever it means to you, getting out there and making a difference, even for that moment. Maybe sometime in September, just for the 15th anniversary of 9/11. I guess we should say commemoration. We really don't want to say anniversary.
Sure.
But to give back, to make the community a little bit better.
Yeah, and I think I'd like to close with this one story. The very last survivor that was pulled from the rubble at the World Trade Center was Janelle Guzman McMillan, and she wrote a book. This person wrote a book, and I absolutely love what was on there. She said, "I believe something good can always come from something bad. Deadly car crashes over the years have resulted in successful campaigns to create safer cars, which have probably saved thousands upon thousands of lives. Fires in buildings that took lives in the past have produced strict standards when buildings are constructed today, such as emergency exits and sprinkler systems, which undoubtedly have also saved lives. The Amber Alert system was named for a 9-year-old girl in Texas named Amber Hagerman, who was abducted and murdered in 1996. This system has likely prevented many child abductions, and versions of it have been implemented in countries all around the world." What happened that particular day to this person, she said, "What happened that day changed my life forever in a good way. It made me realize that the rest of my life needed to be lived differently. I needed to grow up, change my ways, and become the good person my parents raised me to be. Not only have I done that, but now I've shared my story through this book with the hope that others will be touched by my transformation and will be able to turn their lives around." And the book is called Tips on Life and Love by Janelle Guzman McMillan. A great book to be able to pick up maybe on as we're thinking about all these kinds of things. But I love that sentiment, and I think it does sum up what we're trying to speak about today.
It's what we do with our tragedy that really defines us, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It is actually taking things and looking at the sunny side up.
Side up.
That egg's going to fall, but how are you going to do it? Looking at the sunny side up is the best and most practical way to live your life. So thanks for joining us for this first show. We hope that you'll join us each month here on FM 96.3 Waupaca Radio.
This has been Sunny Side Up, with tips on how to look on the bright side when life doesn't seem like all it's cracked up to be. Every month here on Waupaca Radio 96.3 FM.